What's up, everyone? My name is Michael Burrell, and today I'm going to be going over everything you need to know to get started using color in Adobe Illustrator. Let's get started. First things first, I will create a new file. And in here, I want to bring your attention to the right-hand side where it says Advanced Options. Now, if we look underneath this menu, we have two options for color mode. We have CMYK color and RGB color. And it's important you know that there's a difference between these. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. These four colors are the colors that would be in the printers that you have at home or in most printers. These are our colors that we typically print with that are called our process colors. They're the four color print process colors. And when these four are together, you could think of them the way you were taught about the primary colors when you were probably in elementary school. We can use these colors to make up a lot of other colors, and it's hard to make these colors if you're not given them. So these are the foundation of print. Now the alternative is RGB. Now these are red, green, and blue. And these are the basis of digital color. So we used to say web, now we just say digital or projection. These are what you work with when working with light. Something that's meant to be seen on web, on a phone, on an app, on video, anything like that. So we have digital versus print. And it's important you kind of know which one you're working with, although you can change your mind, and I'll show you that in a second. But try to choose the one that is best geared towards your output. All right, I'm going to just grab letter and hit create. And the other place we can change that if you didn't set it already, or if you're not sure what you set, or if you change your mind, is if we go to File, we come down to Document Color Mode, we can change from CMYK to RGB. So you can still affect this after the fact, okay? It's important to know that. All right, to get started just playing around with color, we're going to open up some panels, and let's just work with a basic shape. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I can also hit the letter M to get that tool, and I will draw out my rectangle right here. Go back to my selection tool or hit the letter V to get to my selection tool. And now I have this rectangle here. I'm going to open up a couple panels to work with. First off, I'll go to Window. Now remember, any panel that I don't see here is under my Window menu. So anytime you don't see something, you can go to Window and find it. So we're going to work with a couple things. First thing, we're dealing with color, so let's go to Color. So here's my color picker. Now, there's a couple different spots to choose color. Right now, I have, if I click off, I'm just going to move this shape over a little bit. Hold the space bar so I can move my artboard. And this rectangle is white with a black outline. If I hit Command plus, I can zoom in, click off of it, and you can see there's a black outline and a white shape. All right, and I can also see that shown to me right here in my toolbar. I have a white fill and a black stroke. So I could click on my fill, I can double click it, and I will get a color picker that I can choose the colors that I want. And when I find the color I like, I could hit OK. And now the next thing I draw will have that color as my fill. There you go. I'll hit delete. If I hit this little box right here, it brings me back to the default, or I could hit the letter D on the keyboard and go back to default. So whichever one of these is in front is the one that you're affecting. So I can click on stroke, or I can click on the fill, and I can bring one in front of the other. I have this little swap arrow to swap things back and forth, okay? And I can see the same changes are reflected here. So again, whichever one of these I click in front is the one that I'm dealing with at the moment. Then the third place, so we have one here, one here. We could also see this being affected in our properties panel. So we can choose on stroke, choose on fill, and we'll talk about that little panel in a second. All right, so if I were to, with my selection tool, grab this, and now the fill colors in front, I can up the amount of, say, cyan. And now I have this cyan colored fill. Or I can drop that down. I can go to magenta. Bring this down. I can go yellow, black, and any combination of these. So magenta, add to there, and I can start to shift these different colors and get different results. Now, CMYK is going to be the easiest for most of you to work with and understand what you're going to get. They're the colors we're most used to dealing with. For example, green is a combination of blue and yellow, so I know if I put a lot of cyan and a lot of yellow, I'll get green. Orange is red and yellow. If I do magenta and yellow, kind of tone back on the magenta a little bit, I can get orange. Now, this isn't the only mode. If you're seeing just yours is a little different, if you click this little hamburger right here, we have grayscale, RGB, HSB, CMYK, and WebSafe RGB. So grayscale, pretty straightforward. You're only going to have the options for different levels of gray, and this is a pure black, right? RGB, red, green, and blue, works inverse to what CMYK does. The higher the number here, the lighter the color. So this is white. This is pure light. Bring these colors down. So bring my red down, I get cyan. Bring my green down, I get just blue because that's all that's left. So if I bring these down to 0, black, I can see that adds green, so on and so forth. This is going to be a little bit trickier for most of you to work out with in the beginning. Now, if you have a background in web, this here represents our hexadecimal code or our hex code. This is our web safe color. So if there's a color that I knew I wanted in particular, FF0000, for example, and then click out of that box somewhere, that'll give me FF0000, which is all the red, no green, no blue. I'm going to go to HSB now. So now this is hue, which is the color. So hue just means what color something is. Saturation, which is the intensity of that color. So really, really mild to really, really intense. And then brightness, black to, well, we'll go here, black to white. So if I put my brightness in the middle, you can see something that goes to red, gray, and then as I increase the saturation, the color gets more and more vibrant. Okay, all of these are changing the color. It's just a different way of you handling it. And there's times that you might find a color that you like with CMYK, but you just wish it was a bit brighter, a bit more intense. And so that's when you can jump over to say hue saturation, hue saturation brightness, and say, oh, let me crank up the saturation, let me crank up the brightness, and let's see what that does. All right, so they're all workable ways to get around this. All right. You can also shortcut and find your inverse or complement colors. So you can invert the color, or you can find the complement of that color. And again, I'll go over those probably in other videos, just a bit more in depth. All right, so I'm going to switch back to CMYK. All right, so say I find a color I really like and I want to continue using this throughout my design or my illustration. So let's just grab this like teal color. All right. There's also another way to pick colors, which is going to be our swatches. So I'm going to go to Window and I'm going to find my swatches panel. And here are my swatches. These are pre-saved colors. Now, sometimes you'll have none available here, and I'll talk about what to do in that situation. But these are just some presets. You don't have to use these, right? So I can click through here, get different colors. And anytime you see this white with a red slash, it means none. So now that has no fill. Something to be aware of. If this has a white fill, I can now click the middle and grab this around, or any colored fill. But if it has no fill and I click the middle, there's nothing there to grab. So if I want to grab something, I have to grab the edge, or I can drag a selection box and overlap it a little, and then I can throw a color into here. All right, and now if I start with that color and say this is close to what I want, but I can still make changes in my color palette, okay? So these are some important tips to working around with color. Now, there's other swatch libraries from here. I'm going to click this little, again, hamburger menu drop down. And every time you open a new palette, I recommend just clicking in this and seeing what your options are. We have Open Swatch Library down here, and these are all different preset swatch libraries that Adobe gives you. So you can find color palettes, for example, that are based on, say, skin tone. And you get a list of Adobe skin tone palettes. Right? Or I could go in and say, Open Swatch Library, metals. And these are going to be colors that they recommend using for different metal finish. All right, so you can find a lot of colors starting that way. And if you want to, again, make your own color, so I found that, I think I had that like teal color before, it was kind of nice. Something like this that I want to keep using. All I have to do is go into any of the spots that I can see this fill color, click it, and drag it into my swatches palette. And that'll save that swatch there. It's not the only way I can do it, that's just one very easy way I can do it. I can also double click on that color and get a swatch options box. Now, one thing I recommend doing if you find a color that you like is double click on it. I just check preview, but I'm going to check global. And what global does is it locks in that formula in a very specific way. What it means is now if I were to grab my shape tool and I were to grab a bunch of other instances of this color, right? And I decide now that this teal is not really the color I wanted it to be, I can double click, and because it's a global color, and I can see it's global because it is this little white corner, and I can make a change, and it's going to change them all. It won't just change the one. If I did this without checking global first, it would only change this. It wouldn't have any effect on what I'd already used it for. All right, so this is a really, really useful thing as far as time saving. If you're moving forward with a project, I really recommend using this. Okay. All right. So everything we just did also works for your stroke. If I clicked on stroke and brought that to the front, I'll grab this guy, hit red, and now you can see it's got a red outline around it. All right. We can also up the stroke number in our properties panel right here. We can just hit this up arrow or click this little drop down and choose numbers, or we can type in here, or we can use our arrow key on our keyboard. Lots of different ways we can do that. But you can see these different color combinations. And if you want to, again, swap, you can invert those colors back and forth. Okay. So these are our swatches, working with our color palette, and being able to kind of apply that. There's a few other little easy tricks as well. For example, I have this yellow selected, and I realized, oh, you know what, I wanted that here. You can actually grab this color and just drop it onto something, and you can get that color applied that way. Or same thing from here, you can just grab a swatch and drag it out. If you don't feel like selecting the object, you can do something like this. Right, and now for the stroke of this guy, since it's thicker, I'll use a color I haven't used yet. And then for the fill, there. Right, so different ways that we can work with this. And as I go, these palettes that I know I'm going to start using more and more, I like to begin to dock on the side. So I will just grab this top bar, move this over till it turns blue. I see that line. Same thing with these guys. I'll put them down here so it's underneath. And I can actually click this doubled up arrow and just make them icons so that they fly out so I can see my swatches. I'll just open this up so you can see which one's which. Swatches, or my color, and I'll start building up this side library just so I have the tools that I like having accessible. All right. In the next video, I plan on going over gradients. So you'll see how we can apply colors to gradients and be able to do a little bit more interesting things with this. So make sure you check that one out if you're not already sure. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. You understand working with color a little bit better than you did before. If you have any questions or want me to clear anything up or touch back on anything, go ahead, write it in the comments. I'll make sure to check those and I can add on in future videos.